It is larger than a football field, taller than a five-story building, and it is made of wood. 8 engines, a wingspan wider than any aircraft that has ever flown. Even today, it was designed to carry 750 soldiers, or 2 Sherman tanks, a flying fortress built not of metal, but of timber. It was created to save the world, but it flew only once, for 60 seconds, a single mile, barely 30 meters above the water, and then it vanished, locked away for 30 years, a ghost in a dark hangar, the world's biggest, most expensive secret. Why build a god, a titan of the skies, only to command it to never fly again? This is not the story of an airplane. It is the story of a single man's obsession. A man so rich, so powerful, and so stubborn, that he defied the government, he defied the laws of physics, and he defied reality itself. All to prove one simple point, that the world was wrong, and he was right. If you understand the madness of impossible dreams, if the scale of this ambition already has you hooked, subscribe and turn on notifications. You need to see how this titan was born from chaos. The year is 1942. The world is burning. The war is not being won. It is being lost. Lost in the freezing, dark waters of the North Atlantic. Winston Churchill called it the Battle of the Atlantic. He called it the dominating factor of the war. He knew if the Atlantic fell, the war was over. And it was falling. The German U-boats were winning. They were sharks made of steel, silent hunters, operating in wolf packs. They were sinking ships faster than America could build them. Hundreds of ships, thousands, cargo vessels, tankers, troop transports, each one a lifeline of supplies, food, bullets, fuel, men, each one disappearing beneath the waves. A single torpedo, a flash of orange in the night, and the lifeline to Britain, to Russia, was severed. The ocean had become a graveyard, a cemetery of steel spanning thousands of miles. America was an arsenal, but its weapons could not reach the battlefield. The generals in Washington were desperate. The conventional solution was failing. Building more ships only fed the wolves. They needed a new path. A path the U-boats could not reach. They needed to bypass the ocean itself. They needed to go over it. They needed a bridge, a cargo plane. But the idea was insane. In 1942, planes were small. They were fragile. The B-17 Flying Fortress? It could barely carry the weight of its own bombs, let alone a 30-ton tank. The government needed a miracle. A machine that did not exist, a plane that could carry the payload of a freight ship, at the speed of a fighter, an idea that bordered on fantasy. The call went out, and it was answered by a man named Henry J. Kaiser. Kaiser was not an aviator. He was a builder, a force of nature. He built the Hoover Dam. He built massive concrete ships. He was the king of Liberty ships. He had perfected the art of building cargo vessels on an assembly line. He could build a ship in 4 days. But even he was losing to the U-boats. He saw his creations sinking. He proposed the impossible, a fleet of gigantic flying boats. The U-boat, he declared, will be rendered obsolete. The press loved him. The government was intrigued. But Kaiser had a problem. He built dams. He built ships. He did not know how to build a plane. He needed a partner, someone who understood the sky, someone with the genius to design it, and the madness to actually build it. There was only one name on the list, a man who lived in the shadows, a man who owned the sky. Howard Hughes. The name was a myth, a phantom. He was the richest man in the world, a billionaire recluse, a Hollywood producer, a lover of movie stars. But beneath the celebrity, he was something else. He was an engineer of terrifying genius. He was a pilot who had broken the world speed record. He had flown around the world faster than any human in history. He owned TWA. He owned RKO Pictures. He owned the future. And like the secret labs of the Cold War, Hughes had his own cult of engineering. Hughes Aircraft, a place where impossible ideas were given infinite budgets. Hughes did not accept failure. He did not understand compromise. He did not care about cost. He only cared about perfection, about pushing the boundaries of what was possible. When Henry Kaiser approached Howard Hughes, it was a meeting of titans, the man who built the earth, and the man who owned the sky. Together they received a government contract, $18 million, for 3 flying prototypes. The designation, HK-1, Kaiser Hughes 1, a machine that would win the war. Kaiser would build the hull. Hughes would design the wings, the engines, the soul. The clock started ticking. But the contract had one fatal restriction: a poison pill. The plane could not be made of metal. The war effort demanded every ounce of aluminum, every scrap of steel. It was the critical material list. To build a plane this size, a plane with a wingspan of 320 feet, would consume enough aluminum to build a fleet of fighters. It was forbidden. The project seemed dead. Kaiser was stumped. But Hughes saw an opportunity. He saw a challenge. If metal was forbidden, he would build it from something else, something ancient. Wood. Not the wood of a simple workshop. This would be a new technology. A process Hughes Aircraft had been perfecting in secret. It was called Duramold. It was a composite material. Thin layers of birch wood, bonded together with resin and glue, formed under immense heat and pressure. It was plywood, elevated to science fiction. It was lighter than aluminum, stronger pound for pound, and it was invisible to radar. A stealth bomber, decades before its time. But it was a nightmare to work with. It was fussy. It was delicate. The entire plane would be a handcrafted sculpture, every piece custom-made. The press heard about it, and they laughed. A wooden plane? In the age of the B-29 Superfortress? A plane this big, made of lumber? They gave it a nickname. A name that would haunt Hughes for the rest of his life. The Spruce Goose. The name was a lie. It was made of birch, and it was a mockery. It implied the project was a joke, a rich man's fantasy. Hughes was furious. He hated the name. To him, it was the H-4 Hercules. And it would be his masterpiece. Henry Kaiser, the pragmatist, saw the delays. He saw the obsession. He saw the bottomless pit of engineering. He argued with Hughes. But you cannot argue with a hurricane. Hughes's obsession was total. Kaiser walked away. He left the project. HK-1 was dead. Now it was just H-4. Howard's plane. Freed from Kaiser, Hughes went deeper. He took full control. He moved the project to Culver City, and he built a temple for his new god. Hangar 15. The largest wooden structure in the world. It was vast. A cathedral of timber. So big it generated its own weather. Clouds would form near the ceiling. It was the first massive building in America to be fully air-conditioned. Not for the comfort of the workers, but for the wood. The temperature and humidity had to be perfect, 24 hours a day, or the Duramold resin would fail. The glue would not set. Inside, thousands of workers, mostly women, worked in total secrecy. They were building something that had no precedent. The wings were so thick, a person could walk inside them to service the engines. In flight. The fuselage was a hollow cavern. The tail was taller than an 8-story building. And the engines, 8 of them. Pratt and Whitney Wasp Major. The most powerful piston engines ever made. 3,000 horsepower each. A total of 24,000 horsepower. Everything was the biggest, the strongest, the most expensive. It was a monument to excess, a machine of terrible, breathtaking ambition. But while Hughes obsessed over perfection, while he spent months redesigning a single component. The world outside the hangar was changing. The clock was ticking, and it was winning. The tide of the war turned. The Battle of the Atlantic was won, not by flying cargo boats, but by radar, by codebreakers, by long-range bombers. The U-boat threat was neutralized, and then, June the 6th, 1944, D-Day, the invasion of Europe. The war's end was in sight. Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. The H-4 Hercules was supposed to be a bridge, but the bridge was no longer needed. The problem it was built to solve had vanished. The plane was not just late, it was obsolete. It was a dinosaur, an evolutionary dead end, a 200-ton, $25 million, useless relic, before it was even finished. At this point, the war is won. The contract is void. The money is spent. Any sane person would have stopped, cut their losses, moved on. But Hughes was not a sane person. He kept building. Why? Was it pride? Was it a genius who couldn't let go? Or was he just trying to prove he hadn't failed? What do you think was driving him? Leave your theory in the comments. The government was furious. The war was over, but the bills kept coming. The project was a national scandal, a symbol of wartime waste. Hughes was summoned to Washington to answer for his failure. The Senate War Investigating Committee. A public trial. Broadcast to the nation. This was the new battlefield. The committee was led by a ruthless senator, Owen Brewster. Brewster hated Hughes. He saw him as a war profiteer, a charlatan who had stolen millions and produced nothing but a pile of wood. The confrontation was electric. It was a clash of two Americas. The politician versus the innovator. Brewster grilled him. "Mr. Hughes, you were given $18 million for 3 planes. The war has been over for 2 years. Where are the planes? Did you or did you not spend $25 million of the taxpayers' money?" The room was silent. The cameras were rolling. Hughes was calm. He leaned into the microphone. "I spent my own money," he said. "Millions of it. Over $7 million of my own money. Because I believe in this aircraft." He was no longer a witness. He was a showman. He defended his creation, his engineers, his vision. He attacked the committee. He attacked Brewster, accusing him of corruption, of being a pawn for a rival airline. It was theater. It was a power play. Then Brewster delivered the final blow. "The fact is, this plane, the Spruce Goose, is a failure. It cannot fly, and you know it." This was the moment, the ultimate challenge. Howard Hughes, the genius, the pilot, the patriot, was being called a failure and a fraud, in front of the entire world. His legacy, his company, his entire life, was on the line. He looked at Senator Brewster, and he made his vow, a promise that defined his life. "The Hercules was a monumental undertaking. I have put the sweat of my life into this thing. My reputation is wrapped up in it. And I have stated, if the H-4 fails to fly, I will leave this country, and I will never come back." The gauntlet was thrown. The trial was over. Now there was only one thing left to do. He had to fly the unflyable. November 2nd, 1947, Long Beach, California. The mood was a circus. 30,000 people packed the harbor. A fleet of boats bobbed in the water. The press was everywhere. They had come to see the whale beach itself, to watch the Spruce Goose fail. The great wooden beast was towed into the bay. It was beautiful, ghostly white, shining in the sun. It looked unreal, a machine from another world. Howard Hughes climbed into the cockpit. He wore his trademark fedora. He was not dressed as a test pilot. He was dressed as Howard Hughes. He sat in the captain's chair, a co-pilot beside him. Engineers and reporters filed in behind him. This was not a flight. It was a taxi test, a test of the engines, the systems, to prove to the world it was not just a prop. He signaled, one by one. The 8 Wasp major engines roared to life, a sound that shook the harbor. A cloud of blue smoke. The Hercules began to move. It was graceful, turning slowly on the water. It was alive. Hughes announced over the radio, "We are beginning the first taxi test." The plane moved forward. 20 miles per hour. 40. It was cutting through the water. "Everything seems fine," he reported. He brought it to a stop. He turned it around. "We will make one more run." The crowd watched. This was it. The show was over, but Hughes was not performing for the crowd. He was settling a score. He spoke to his co-pilot. "Let's see." He pushed the 8 throttles forward. All the way. The sound was not a roar. It was thunder. A physical force that hit the beach. The giant plane surged. 50 miles per hour. 70. The water was tearing past the windows. The plane was shaking. A reporter on board, terrified, yelled, "Howard, are you sure?" Hughes ignored him. He was not a billionaire. He was not a movie mogul. In this moment, he was a pilot. 80 miles per hour. The plane was on the step, planing across the water like a speedboat. His co-pilot called out the speed. 90. Hughes felt the controls. The water was letting go. He pulled back, just slightly. And then, it happened. The impossible. The shaking stopped. The sound of the water was gone. There was only the hum of the engines, and silence. The H-4 Hercules, the Spruce Goose, the joke, the failure, the 200-ton wooden monster, was airborne. It flew. It was flying. For 60 seconds. It held the air, 30 meters high. It flew for 1 mile. A single, impossible, glorious mile. The crowd on the beach was silent. Then they erupted. They were witnessing a miracle. Hughes had done it. He had kept his promise. He had defeated the Senate. He had defeated the cynics. He had defeated reality. He gently set the plane back down on the water. A perfect landing. He taxied back to the dock. The flight was over. His war was won. Howard Hughes climbed out of the cockpit. He had proven his point. And that was all that mattered. He ordered the H-4 Hercules towed back into its massive climate-controlled hangar. And he sealed the doors. For good. The plane never flew again. Not once. It sat in that hangar. In the dark. For the rest of his life. He paid a full-time crew. Hundreds of men. For 30 years. Their only job. To maintain the Spruce Goose. In a constant state of flight readiness. The engines were run every month. The systems checked. The wood polished. It was a ghost. A 200-ton monument. To a single moment. To a 60-second victory. It was the physical manifestation of one man's ego. A king in exile. Waiting for a call that would never come. The H-4 Hercules did not change the war. It did not revolutionize aviation. It was, by every practical measure, a failure. But it tells a more powerful story. A story about the line between genius and madness. A story of obsession and the terrifying, beautiful things that can be built when one person refuses to believe in the impossible. A victory more useless and more profound than any battle ever won. If this story of impossible ambition captured you, if you felt the weight of that 60-second flight, subscribe and ring the bell. History is filled with these incredible machines. And check out this other video about the perfect weapon that was defeated, not by an enemy, but by time itself.